There we go, that's me. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Andrew Lefebvre. I work for Coldfront Labs. Today I'm talking about layout, layout with layout paragraphs. I heard that Frank has cookies in his meeting, but thanks for coming to this one before lunch. Don't have any cookies, but I have a cool slide, so everyone can kind of like slide off to lunch after this one. My name is Andrew Lefebvre. I'm a project coordinator, software developer. Everyone can kind of like turn their chairs to see the best screen that fits them, because they're kind of all presented there. I don't have one here for me, but that's fine. So feel free to adjust as you need to. I've been working for Coldfront Labs for about 2 years. Drupal has kind of been my first CMS that I've had to really get my hands on and understand and learn, so it's been really good for me kind of as a newer developer to kind of understand like what Drupal is and be able to kind of like understand like what is this big complicated system, what's so complicated about it, how do people use it, and where the kind of connection between people who are building these sites and the people who are using them and maintaining them. It's been really good to kind of see that. I can talk louder, yeah, because I don't have a mic, so I'll talk as loud as I can. So today, I got really inspired by all the Drupal Starshot stuff. So there's a lot more kind of spacey kind of star stuff in my presentation. But I do want to talk about the idea of habitable zones. And today I'm talking about content editors in particular, but also people who are maintaining sites and building sites for content editors. That our job as site builders is to kind of create this habitable zone where content editors get a site, they're being asked to, hey, it's your turn to like create the content and run the site. And for us, we kind of want to be in this Goldilocks zone that I want to be kind of getting everyone to kind of think about of like the good ways of running a site and the good ways for expectations on content authors to be able to manage their content and see what's going on and see what's going to happen. So I have a bunch of different strategies that's kind of using the best of the layout paragraphs, and I have slides running for some reason. I guess if I talk too long, let's go to the next slide. That's fine. I didn't mean to hit that button. Okay, so a habitable zone is an area around the star where it's not too hot or not too cold, where liquid water can exist. So kind of want to have that kind of idea from science and kind of merge it into a realm of content editing. And so for us, if we're talking today, the habitable zone for a content editor is the area of control an editor has over content creation and their page layouts. So it's kind of where we're going. Who is this presentation for? Well, it's for content authors particularly. It's also for site builders who build page layouts or manage displays, or they're designing and implementing content type entity forms, and also for astronomy and astrology fans that are also here today as well. Okay. So Drupal has a wide, varied amount of different people that are involved in developing different parts, and it's a very complicated kind of system. But today I just wanted to make sure that we're in this kind of sphere space where we're between the developer and the front-end developer and the user experience, and kind of just this kind of visual front-end guide of how the Drupal admin is being used and how you expect content editors who are using the site, of what area of Drupal they're seeing, and I'm already sliding through things. I'm going to have to turn that off, because that's too much. That is not 2 seconds. Anyway, that's fine. I'll go back if I need to. So I have a nice XKCD to kind of also talk about this as well, where we're not necessarily roasting marshmallows, but when it comes to what our job is and what we're expecting people who are creating content to do, that if they get too hot, then it's kind of like they're getting burned, or they're just like, a lot of what they're doing is now just they need to know HTML, or they need to know how to like what's happening with the Drupal styling and theming and things. And so if we don't want that, we can use layout paragraphs as like a nice sweet spot zone to get content editors to be able to like build content pages in the content system kind of thing that we'll get to. And if you're too far away, then it's kind of like you're getting lost in just how Drupal and, say, customized layouts for layout builders being used. And so at a certain point, you're kind of managing 2 different forms for the same content. Sure, I was done there. Kind of like habitat problems that content editors going to have to kind of describe this. So if I say too hot, I'm referring to there's a lot of like HTML code that's being put into Sync Editor. I'm talking about how the body fields are being used a lot. And that can kind of be like a lot of expectations on, well, that code better be right because it's going to be presented to the page. And too cold is this idea of, well, now there's a lot of customization, and now the content editor can do can do anything, but what they're trying to do like needs to be done in a certain way, or else then they kind of they get frustrated or they get lost, or what they are putting into the form and how it gets presented on the page doesn't always match up. So we're going to try and like stay in the middle here, where it's nice and habitable. Okay. So helpful concepts to know. Hopefully you're here early enough for the Drupal 101. If not, I'm going to go through some of the other concepts really, really quickly. So just looking at making sure everyone's aware of how to edit content. Let's get a quick poll of the audience of who actually is a content author, or who like works on Drupal as like a, hey, I manage the content and stuff. And then people who are kind of more on the site building kind of side, or like needing to like maintain the stuff there. Okay, great. Also going to be touching on layout builder and page templates, and then CKeditor5, and then Drupal layout paragraphs does extend the paragraphs module, so like a little bit just an awareness so that everyone knows what a paragraph is, and not like the writing kind of paragraph, the like Drupal kind of paragraph. Okay. Okay. So for content authors, usually their jobs for things are they have to manage content, or they have to like make a blog post, or they have to go make a news release, or make an event. And so a lot of their experience when they're using Drupal is like, okay, I have a job to do, I need to make it as quickly as possible, I need to know what I'm supposed to make. And so for them, they're entering Drupal from like I need to make the content, and they kind of have an understanding that there's a form to fill out, or like a content type has these things that are these fields on a content form, or they have to make references, or they have to put images on, that like they have this kind of understanding. And then things that are happening with code, they don't always have an awareness about, or it's not really their responsibility to. They're just kind of like updating the content that's there. So just making sure that that's known. And then here's CKeditor5, which is a plugin system that has a whole bunch of customizations and things where people can really configure the site to have, depending on how much role you have access to all these different amounts of buttons, and you can add different things like links or entity embeds for media items, or all these different text editor things. That like this toolbar itself is very customizable, and for other functionalities and things, there's extra things. Well, that's really quick. Okay. Here's just an example of CK editor that's using text that I was able to pull, and this one is also like a little bit of a simpler kind of text editor. So there's just a few options that they have, so you can really like control each of these fields of, hey, like, don't put HTML, please, it's not going to work, or hey, like, this content editor's, this section doesn't have pictures or just has tables. Like, you can kind of like pick and choose what you want that to be. Okay. And then talking about paragraphs. So there are times where a lot of content's going into the CK editor field, and you are trying to do different things like floats, or you're trying to have images that are into places and things. And so what Paragraph's going to do by default, or when you install it with Drupal core, alongside it, is that it gives you access to kind of build your component pages and lay them out into these different sections that are called paragraphs. And then there are a collection of fields that exist, and you can stylize them all into be working components that based on how your theme works, so that if you are a content editor and you need to make a paragraph that has this like quote block and it has a little name underneath, that you can kind of just make that, and it will be a paragraph that kind of exists. And so a lot of the like different sections of a body field gets broken down into paragraphs if you set up your structure that way, and then you can kind of define each content type to have a different amount of paragraphs for whatever you need. It's all like kind of customizable for that. But when I'm talking about paragraphs, I'm talking about text images, text with images, or accordions, or tables, or call to actions, or buttons. They're all things that can be made into paragraphs. You can even put paragraphs into paragraphs if you really want to, but you should be careful with that because it can get a little bit complicated. So that's what a paragraph is. Here's an example of a paragraph, if people haven't seen them before, of just, you're not using CK editor of defining all like the headings and the text. You can kind of have like your, so these are like 3 paragraph sections that they added. So the first one's like a text type, and then a quote type, and then a slideshow type. So this is just pulled from the module example. So you can kind of have the content editor, if they don't know exactly what they're putting in, they don't have to fit it into the body field and like really understand, like with the styles drop down of like what these things are going to look like. You can just say, okay, I know it's going to be a quote. I'll just fill out the form, and then Drupal's going to handle what it looks like. Or if there's different buttons for things, for customizing things, you can kind of set it in those field widgets there. So here's a page on just how we do page templates and how we kind of tell Drupal what to render to the page when it's being used, and we have this as like the manage display kind of form. And so Drupal kind of has this default kind of manage display, which gives you all your fields that are there, and you can kind of pick and choose what widget to use to render it. It's very drag and drop friendly and easy to reorder, and it's really, really good for kind of simple content types or like a one-column layout if you just know everything needs to be on the page. And then if you are doing some more complex things or kind of mixing different columns and things, Layout Builder is a good thing to use. It's part of Drupal core now. Same with a bunch of other things that are evolving with layout. So it's there. It gives you a good ground to be like, hey, for all of my news items, I want them all to look like this, okay? And then for all of my basic pages, I want them to look like this. Or for all my events, you can really predefine how you want each version of the content type to look. It's really good at defining sections and labels and putting patterns, if you have them, just embedded onto the page there. So if you have your fields that are being filled in from the form, you could then just have Layout Builder kind of just slot everything in. You can also customize them so that within a content type you can have different views, but we'll get to that later. But that's what that part there means. Okay. So when you're kind of deciding on how page layouts are being made, you kind of have this like choice, and I just wanted to show what the page layouts kind of look like. And when we are getting to layout paragraphs to kind of like render it and turn it on, you need to use it from the paragraphs, like that paragraphs field, the widget there, use the layout paragraphs. And then here's an example of Layout Builder. So on this example here, all the fields that are attached to the content type are being placed into the different sections. And then you can kind of like see what's there. And there's even like view blocks or other things that aren't part of the content that you can put on there. You can put custom blocks on Layout Builder. You can use other view blocks for that exist in the site, and contextual filters can update for things. So you can do a lot with defining how you want Layout Builder to work. And sometimes you'll have like related blogs that are like on the sidebar, and like that's very easy to configure within Layout Builder and kind of have that set up. It's not necessarily what content authors need to deal with. They just need to fill out the form. So setting up the site kind of to be understood or kind of be made that this is kind of like a good kind of understanding, but there's content authors that do customize page layouts, so they need to know more about Layout Builder, but it's not like a have to. Okay. Just want to make sure that everyone's clear on like saving content and updating content and publishing content. And so this kind of checkbox on your content on your content forms, if you have that box checked, it gets pushed to published. And if you are saving your content, it can be there. And it Drupal has like workflow transitions, so different content editors can kind of make changes or put changes into revisions. So the way that content gets updated and the way that changes are, I just want to make sure that everyone's kind of clear on how that system works. There's also a part, if you're using customized layouts, that also needs to be saved. And I wanted to just take a quick pit stop just to make sure, because I found this thing that previews do that I want to make sure everyone's aware of, because it's a pretty cool feature, because you have this idea of, hey, I need to fill out all these forms, and then I want to check the page to make sure it works, and the preview window can kind of give you that look, but it also gives you a little like drop down at the very top of the page, and if you change that, you can pick and choose, and you can see like what will my content look like in all the different forms that it's used. So with Manage Display, you can have a news type, and then it's, well, when you're looking at the news, it looks like this, but when it comes up in a response from a view selector thing, it will look like this as a page listing, and if it's being used as a search results, it'll just look like that. So you can kind of just double check and make sure by using the preview before you save anything, like, is this what I want? Is this going to look right? Is that what I want it to be? Nope, it's part of core. Yeah, isn't it great? I've always known this, but then I found out that some other people are like, wait, this is fixed, or like this works. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we have that. So like, it's not like you hit save and you just hope it works. Like you can check, or like you don't need, like the preview link system kind of really works if you want other people to review it. But if you have proper workflow moderation kind of set, you can kind of have like the person who's just saving the first copy of like, is this what I want? Okay, great. If you try to click away or do anything else on this page, it'll like warn you and it'll be like, you're still technically in the form, page, do you want to save this or like leave? So you can kind of like discard it and you might lose work, but you're still technically part of the form. You're just getting the like Drupal render of this is what the site looks like, or this is what this content will look like, and all of the approved and kind of configured versions of that page, of that node, all those displays work. Okay. All right. So my whole like habitable zone kind of analogy and having content authors exist in this too hot, too cold kind of system, that I have an example of what a too cold would look like, or just kind of a general kind of warning to people who are setting up sites for content editors, that there's on your manage display form, when you're turning on Layout Builder, there's a checkbox here, and there's a allow content editors to store customized layouts kind of option here. And there's a big kind of warning on if you click this button, that means that a content author can just change what Layout Builder will present, and then each piece of that content will be different. And so sometimes you want that. Sometimes you want, it's just like a landing page content type, and you just want to have, here's like a blank slate, like content editors can kind of do whatever. But if you do that, then any further changes to the template has to kind of like override, or has to be like, it kind of like, it doesn't apply to all of them because they're all are individually changed. And all that content that is stored in Drupal is now stored in the like kind of page layout kind of data table, as opposed to just being stored in like the regular fields and through the regular kind of layout builder. So you kind of have like a lot of customization, but this is like a really big button click that is really hard to kind of take back, or like there's other ways to kind of set up things with layout paragraphs instead, as like a maybe try layout paragraphs before you kind of get to this button kind of state. Because, yeah, and then the other kind of approach on the other side is that sometimes body fields get really complicated, or like you have like your whole form, but then you're spending so much effort on like what the body field looks like as like the one section, or what's going into that main kind of CK editor thing. And there's times where content's being used and it's being expanded upon, and then you kind of get like a lot of stuff that's getting in there. And at a certain point, you're kind of trying to like get everything to work and fit properly, and it's kind of like a big cat. Okay, and here's like another example of something being too hot, where you're having a lot of content that's in here, and you're having to kind of scroll and make sure that like the image floats are working, or making sure that your headings are working, and you can have all this kind of predefined and pre-styled and working, but it's working like as long as CK editor is working, or as long as the theme is working, and you kind of like, you aren't using Layout Builder much anymore, and you aren't using the like templates of what's existing with setting up all your fields to handle this content anyway. And so at a certain point, if you're having multiple fields, multiple headings within your main kind of body field, or if you're placing like images at the same time, like CK editor is really good at handling text and different types of text and things. But having like stylized components, like if you're putting alerts or buttons or accordions or tables, like you can use paragraphs for that and kind of have that be like your kind of go-to, and you can build them with layout paragraphs. Okay, so layout paragraphs kind of takes the Drupal paragraphs kind of idea that I talked about earlier about taking your body field and separating them into different groups, and it also gives the content editor like a little window of like, here's your content, and it's like Layout Builder, but the things that you change inside there, it's still in the entity form, and it's not creating extra override layouts. So Layout Builder is really good at keeping people there. It still has drag and drop for everything, and to me, from what I've seen, the sites that really use it, it's really like enabling of just, oh hey, like there's a need to have individualized content. Like say you have some blogs that need to have a second column, but not all of them, that you can just, well, that section of the page can be done with layout paragraphs, and then the content editor, the content author who's making that content can kind of decide there, oh, is this a one-column one or a two-column one, as opposed to just, oh, we'll just do a layout builder override and just kind of do it. Yeah. So if we're kind of looking at like the use case for layout paragraphs, it's like if you have the entire page that you're managing and all the content's being put on the page, like layout paragraph sections kind of gives you like a small little like piece of like, here's the content area, and I'll show you how it works. But yeah, it's kind of like a mini version of, or like a bridge kind of version of what Layout Builder and customized layouts would do. So when you have the layout paragraphs module installed, in the content entity form, you need to enable layout paragraphs, and this will give you a widget in that form. So there's a paragraphs field. In this example, it's actually called content as the label. And so you kind of have your form where you're filling in your title and your body and your field and things, and then you have this content section. And the first thing you need to do is you need to tell the page like how many columns you want. And so there's kind of a two-click button kind of thing you need to do. You need to like load in the number of columns you want as the section is defined, and you can tell it that you can predefine it to be like, hey, like use the themes like 1-column layout or 2-column or 3 or 4. That the content editor has to decide on how many columns they want, and then once they do that, then they can kind of start placing their paragraphs just like they would with the regular paragraph system. So in here, in this content type, there's these different paragraphs that are available to the editor to add. So they can add a call to action or a featured or a feature list or an image or a paragraph. That these are options that they get to pick. And when they get placed one by one, this is inside the section now. I can now rank them and put them in and order them, and then they'll exist. And you can kind of see as you're building this out. And if it was a 2-column one, then you can see where those 2 columns are, and you can make sure that it's lined up. And then the content, all the like special changes you need to make to this piece of content, it exists in that field, not the body field, and then you can still check it with the preview. So the layout paragraphs module is increasing popularity. It's getting used a lot more over the years. So it's like tripled in size since I've heard about it for the first time in 2022. So it's over 10 sites now. And then the benefits of defining layout paragraphs. So it's easy to use. It's has all the drag and drop that people kind of ask for, where they want to make sure that they can kind of like reorder things, or like, oh, I don't want to do it in that way. That a lot of content editors are just trying to like get the content in and get it to look right. And if they need to make quick adjustments, that staying in the one form is really useful. It saves time because you don't need to learn all the ins and outs of Layout Builder. That Layout Builder is great, but it's kind of a, here you go, and sometimes it's hard to understand like how to input the right changes of things, or it's really good for like site builders to use Layout Builder to just kind of get the fields in and go. But if you're asking for site maintainers to go and like, now you're going to put a block inside Layout Builder, and that's going to be the text of things, it's a little bit harder to use. Also, Layout Builder doesn't work the best with paragraphs. It does better with blocks. So a big difference between blocks and paragraphs is that paragraphs are really good for like one-off kind of one-time use cases, where blocks are really good if you're repeating them and having the same block being used on other pages. That Layout Builder really wants to like grab a block and throw on a page, where if you're already using paragraphs, it kind of makes using Layout Builder like at a certain point, it's kind of working against it. So layout paragraphs is there as like a, hey, you can kind of like work into that. And also there's times where I've seen some sites where they have a content type that's getting quite big, and there's a lot of different types of content in it, and they want to like make a second content type. And it's like, well, here are like the blogs, and then here are the special blogs. And it's like, well, you don't need to make a whole content type for that. You can just use layout paragraphs and just have the individualization that's there kind of exist inside that one section. And if it's already using paragraphs, it's fine. And then it's still highly customizable, and you can really build like a toolbox for content editors of, hey, like here's your little box of what you want to play with for adding images for things and adding tables, that the stuff that you need to make, and it might not be needed for every single time. It can still be used, and you can still like tell Drupal what you want to do with it. Potential problems with layout paragraphs. So paragraphs can be a little bit more complicated. Sometimes people have a hard time kind of like understanding what they're really used for, or they kind of get them mistaken for blocks, or someone has an idea to like just use a paragraph that has other paragraphs inside, and then the content editing form, like just the editing form of where you are when you're inserting fields, can get a little bit rushed or busy, or like just really like, okay, like I need the right spot. And it does add an extra layer of complexity to the entity form, where people are looking to like just fill out fields, or just upload an image, or just select an image from Layout Builder, or for Drupal's media library. That having this like extra kind of widget that exists, it can be a little hard to conceptualize at first. Having the kind of two-step widget process there, like it is a bit clunky or like hard to kind of like, wait, like why can't I add paragraphs yet? And you have to like, no, I need to like pick the sections first. That it kind of has a bit of a like a entry need that's needed there, that you can't just start adding paragraphs. You have to tell the system like this is how many columns you're going to have. And it does take some planning because you can't really just throw it into the form. It's kind of there as like as you're developing the site or as you're kind of planning out what needs to go where, that you're kind of having to decide like when to use layout, the section there in the content section for Layout Builder. And if you're looking to repeat paragraph content, so if you're looking at like, oh, I need to update that thing, but it's in a paragraph, you have to like go to each of those pieces of content. So like you kind of have to like figure out what needs to be updated and where it is. So it can be a little bit harder on the planning side. But if you have the like need of what the content author needs to do with the content, you can kind of set up and configure layout paragraphs to like really benefit those type of cases. And then once it's set up, then they're just kind of off and running. So I have another slide on when to use it. I think I'm really fast on time right now. But yeah, so when to use layout paragraphs, when there's some distinction within the content type, and you have more than one column, and you're looking to have like the content that I talked about before. If you're already using Layout Builder, which is part of Drupal core, and if you already have the paragraphs module installed on the site that you're using, that layout paragraphs is like one extra module that just kind of marries these two ideas into like one form, into one place. I've been speaking that once, sure. There are times when you're trying to theme a site or trying to make changes to the theme or trying to update what some style is, that updating the theme and the themes are inside CK Editor can be a little bit harder or a little bit like an extra making sure that the changes are happening, where if you're keeping if you have your predefined paragraphs and if you're using the kind of like the fields that are part of the paragraphs or part of the content type, it's a lot easier for themers to kind of make quick changes or kind of make updates to how things are being styled. That using the like to pulled method of like having all these different layout builder customized content pieces, it can get harder to be like, oh, this thing here needs to change. Okay, there, it's going to work. And it can avoid making extra content types and kind of just reduce that kind of kind of clogging up a system that you have, that if you can kind of keep each content type in the lane that needs to be, layout paragraphs can kind of like be a really good sweet save of like, okay, here's what's going on. Okay, and what can content authors do? So to kind of, from a content author perspective, when they're looking at sites, that they can try to ask site builders for what they need and understanding how their workflow moderation is. So if they have a piece of content that's being revised and then being put into other states, that they can kind of make sure that they can they can use the layout section system to like keep everything in the form and then be like, hey, these are the changes that are being made, and they can kind of know where keeping all the content into the one form can speed up that content moderation flow process. You can have the layout sections be having the paragraphs like be defined on what they can use, so the editorial experience is great. They can ask for help text in entity forms is a good thing to do, and making sure that when they're filling out content, they know where things to go. Having a style guide or a component library to use is great, and then just understanding how to use paragraphs and layout paragraphs, great. And then for site builders and people who are maintaining sites, that it is our responsibility to make sure that we're building the best habitat for content authors, that a lot of times that they'll have certain requests or certain complaints, and they can just be solved by just updating the form a little bit better, or just if there are complaints about how Drupal is as a system to use, that like the versatility of how Drupal can be changed or how Drupal can be modified to suit each team or each process or each whatever, like Drupal can change anything about it. And so it's on us to be like, what is the need that they need to do? Oh, how does Drupal need to do that? Oh, okay, we'll just do that then. Understanding that customized layouts and enabling that like is a big deal, and it changes a lot about how data gets stored, and whenever there's migration changes or whenever there's any type of like overriding system that needs to have some sort of change, that having that customized layout button like really makes it harder to make changes. So avoiding that when possible can really speed up workflows and times for maintaining stuff. Or it's always better to be using fields and paragraphs, and so having your data being stored in this, oh, here's the field for this, and kind of understanding your needs of what a content needs to do, and then trying to have it be broken down into smaller parts is really great. And so layout paragraphs can really help do that. And yeah, we can really build a toolkit that can really help content authors kind of manage their content better, so that they want to use Drupal more, and so that they're not having like a whole because it's very easy for someone to get lost in Drupal with just the amount of things that they can change or the amount of things that they can add. And so the way that we can kind of streamline their entry and how they're using Drupal and how they kind of are experiencing the site, that's something that we can kind of peek into or see or kind of take advantage of. Yeah, so in closing, looking at layout paragraphs, and we're wanting to be creating a habitable zone for them, and it's kind of a mix of two different thinkings, or it's kind of like a balance between these two kind of concepts, where if something is too cold, or if you have customized layouts, or they're just the struggle of trying to fill out these forms is getting challenging, or like this thing isn't doing what I want it to do, that kind of be like one system that Drupal can kind of, or people who are using the site can kind of fall into, but layout paragraphs can kind of ready that, or kind of steer that into a more ideal workflow. And then you can also have just way too much going on in body fields, or there's way too much reliance on needing to know HTML. And there's a lot of content authors that don't have a lot of like coding experience, and so they can kind of just use Drupal for filling out forms and layout paragraphs and kind of like keep that kind of nice habitable kind of area there. Yeah, so I'm a little bit fast for my slides moving, but that's okay. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
So that example you had of the big cat box.
Yes.
Would you recommend taking the content, putting it into, turning it into components, in layout paragraphs, or turning it into individual fields and paragraphs?
Yeah, if you define them as paragraphs first, and then every time that type of component is being used, it's going to look the same. So from a theme perspective, it'll be there, and the placement of once it's added into CK Editor, you kind of have to like see what it is there, but it's taking up space. Where having it stay as a form, you can still see like what are the fields that are being added to that component, and then you don't need to see it until you're ready. Or it could be there and it's fine, but you can kind of understand more of what it's going to look like or where it's going to go. And the CK Editor has like it has like a drop down, like styles drop down, where you can kind of like pick and choose, like, oh, I want my headings to be like this, and you can predefine those, but some of those rely on plugins, or like it could be a little bit complicated to like see and change, or like making sure that like text spacing is correct and stuff. But if you just need a heading, then you can just have like, here's a paragraph type that's just like the heading, and then you know that the spacing is going to be correct because that heading is being used. That kind of helps. So yeah, I would recommend kind of grouping the fields and where they need to be, or just understanding that like having the content being stored in fields is a lot more kind of useful for like searching, or for kind of like identifying where things are, as opposed to just having the body field. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have any comments on workflow for bilingual sites?
Workflows for what, sorry?
Bilingual sites.
Bilingual sites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can answer that. So the paragraphs don't support translation. But what that means is that your paragraphs and then your paragraph layout are the same in all languages. So on the paragraphs themselves are translated. So the data fields on those change. So when you make your content with paragraphs, and then the paragraph layouts is all over the spots, and fields everywhere. When you go to your other translation languages, you cannot change or add new sections or move them around. You can only translate the fields that actually have the text data in it. And so it is really just translating everywhere that has data translatable data, and then the structure is fixed and then controlled by whatever the source is.
So, in short, it's easy.
Yes, in short, it's easy, unless you're going to be like, this piece of content is going to look radically different in every language, in which case that's not going to work, because it doesn't translate that way. It assumes that like you're going to keep the layout of the content the same in all your languages, which I guess might be a problem if you're translating from like right to left or left to right languages, maybe that's an issue. But I mean, for the most part, yeah, it's that.
Excellent system.
Was that?
Grid system.
Oh, that's right. You just make the grid system flip based on the font. Yeah, you kind of do it in the CSS.
Great. Any other questions? Yes.
So this is like the third or fourth session that I've seen on paragraphs, and I've never taken the plunge. For a lot of different reasons, but I've got a site that's built with paragraphs where the editors need a more visual system. And I just kind of switch to layout paragraphs.
Yeah, you can gradually start introducing paragraphs for sure. Like if it's predominantly coming from like a body section, and it's like, hey, like for some pieces of content we want to like start having paragraphs, you can kind of introduce them.
Sorry, for a site that already has paragraphs.
Oh, for already having paragraphs, you use layout paragraphs. Yeah, it's just.
You just switch the widget.
Yeah, it's just a widget switch. Yeah, if you have your field paragraphs, where all like the list of the paragraphs are, you can just install a module, and then it's just the formatter change in the form.
How well does it integrate with the wider ecosystem of paragraph modules? I feel like the chooser for choosing what component you want to add is a little bit lackluster, a little bit hard to use. I mean, you've probably got to play different paragraph types. So if I wanted to add a paragraph model that made that, if it's better than it can work, the other paragraphs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Sorry, can you clarify? Were you like talking about like adding like new types of paragraphs?
No, one of your screenshots was click a button to add a new paragraph. And if you've got 20 different types of paragraphs, that's going to be not useful. But there are enhancement modules for paragraphs. Yeah.
Okay. So like reduce the selection list?
It's just different ways of doing the selectors. Like when you click the plus and you get like call to action, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
If you have a lot, it's like onerous.
Yeah.
And in paragraphs, there's different plugins for how those render.
Oh, yeah, if it's like the series of buttons or like the drop down kind of
But I
thing?
don't know if the paragraph uses the paragraph selector or if it has its own paragraph selector.
And this is kind of why I haven't jumped into it yet, is because I'm nervous about it.
It probably
Most
uses
people
the
use
other.
paragraphs, some people use layout builder. Layout paragraphs is a distant third, and then preferred number 4. I want to be tied to something that most people aren't using and the innovation isn't going into.
I would make an argument.
Able to assuage those concerns.
I'd say like if you have that many paragraphs on your site, you might, because if you have individual paragraph fields, you can limit which paragraphs are available for the different sort of use cases. I mean, if you have a one catch-all, then I mean you're going to show all the paragraphs that you've got. But if you could categorize them into different fields, like okay, all of our call to action stuff would be attached to this paragraph section. All of our like primary content stuff would be up here, and you sort of split them that way. You could reduce the number of things that you see, but I mean, yeah, like just have to style it for or write a module that sort of fixed it for
Yeah.
One module's probably where layout paragraphs kind of does takes all the stuff that already exists and then sticks it in a modal.
Yeah.
So it's pretty heavy on modals. So it doesn't it usually just uses everybody else's interface. So I would expect it to work, but I've never played with that.
Any other questions? Yes.
Adding a layout section, so not the paragraphs yet, but first add a layout section. There's options to like indicate the main, say you have like a three column. There's then options to choose. I think it's like a grid within those columns.
Mm-hmm.
So you can decide which one is going to, or how many columns to take up for like a extra large tree, kind of goes down. Where do you see that fitting in that sort of hospitable zone? What was it?
Habitable zone.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Habitable zone for content authors. Like, should we be learning that and deciding like where that how many columns we can do it in? Does that make sense? Or is that
Yeah. I've seen it where there's like a checkbox for like, hey, like on this content, it's going to be like extra wide on the type that it's on there. And so I've seen those kind of controls, and then that checkbox will like, hey, for this type of page, it's going to be in like a slightly like taking up more of the white space on the sides. I don't know if I've seen that inside like layout paragraphs with the section it can contain, but I don't see why not. Should be fine. Yeah, I didn't show a picture of the layout section kind of widget there. But yeah, I think you have most of the theming kind of options that you would get. Like, if the theme supports like all the different kind of grid systems and windows and different types of columns, that it should show up there, I think.
Yeah, the layout plugins define what show up in there. So depending on what plugin you've selected for that layout, you get different sets of options. So if you want to give people the like if you control every, like we're talking bootstrap, every 12 columns, you want to be able to split it down to that granularly and expose the option. You like to give trusting that they'll use it, or you just have same defaults, or like where most of the time we're gonna have 33, 33, 33, or 25, 25, 50 split on those layouts. As long as that's conveyed to the content author, if they don't ever expand that advanced section, and you just choose it and go, they're fine. But you don't have to make those available if you don't want to. So if you think your staff are capable of like making those sorts of decisions, and at the very least, it's working within the grid that's there, so it should work. It's just, it's just one of those activities you can turn on and off if you really want to. So I guess as with everything, the answer is it depends, but it doesn't hurt anything that it's there as long as it's like hidden. But yeah, that's fine.
Great. Do you have a question, Francis?
Actually, your question is question because I was wondering if the columns were responsive.
Oh. Yeah.
They don't have to.
Well, now I understand.
Great. Okay, is that all the questions? Excellent. Okay. So I guess we're all set.
I think it's lunch is next. So yes, just want to let anybody who doesn't know. So this is just a happy coincidence at City Hall.